Good evening, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I love watching that number climb. We're over 700 of you already here. So that makes me so happy because that means you all are engaged, you all are paying attention, and you are still willing to work hard to make a difference, especially this year. So happy to have you here. My name is Julie Womack. I am the head of organizing for Red, Wine, and Blue. I think we actually have a lot of new people joining us tonight. So I do want to give you just a little bit of background and say welcome. We are so thrilled to have you here. Red, Wine, and Blue is a national community. We empower women across the country to defeat extremism in their communities. We have about 500,000 members across the country and 830 local affiliated groups who are doing this work. So we are so glad to have you here as part of the community. We do events like this about twice a week. So come here when you're having a long day and you just want to find other people who feel like you, people who share your values, and you want to have some great conversations and get inspired. We would love to have you come back. One of the ways that you can do that, and I'm going to also speak to our members who don't know about this yet, is we just launched an app. So the Red Wine and Blue app, and I'm going to get that up on the screen for you real quick so you can see that. So it's really easy. Just go to the App Store, look for Red, Wine, and Blue, or you can scan these QR codes. But it's a really easy place to find our events that are coming up because the events are in there. You can have community conversations with women across the country. You can find messaging guidance and explainers, and there's just a ton of information in there. And I bet you people in the chat are already saying good things because I know people have always been saying so far that they really love it. So that's what we're asking you to do tonight, just to stay in touch with us. So I'm going to stop my screen share on that. Just go to the App Store if you still need to download it. But we know and we recognize, that right now everything feels very chaotic, and the last few days have been even more ramped up than I think we've been seeing for the past several months. And I know that people do just want to shut down, and I just want to point out that that is exactly what authoritarians want us to do. They want us to disengage. They want us to step back. And with this many people on the call, we're over 800 now. I just want you guys to think about the impact if we actually step up and do something, work together, the difference that we can make. Most of you across the country this year are going to be having local elections, your school boards, your city councils. I know Virginia, I know New Jersey, you guys got a lot going on your plate, but that is what I know most of you are looking at. And really, the way we push back on the chaos that's coming out of DC is to elect those common sense local leaders who are going to stand up for our rights and push back against this chaos that we're seeing. And so, really, the perfect person to talk about all of this with you is here tonight. And so, I am really, really thrilled, and I'm going to bring up right now. We have Ruth Ben-Ghiat. I'm going to say it properly. She just told me how to say it, and I'm already going to mess it up. Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who is here with us. And for those, I'm sure most of you know who she is because you're joining this event, but she's a professor of history and Italian studies at New York University. She writes about authoritarianism, propaganda, and democracy protection. She's a recipient of the Guggenheim and other fellowships, and she appears regularly on MSNBC and other networks. She publishes Lucid. We're going to give the link in a second for her Substack newsletter on threats to democracy. And also, we're going to talk a little bit. She has a book, Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present, which we'll drop a link if you're interested in checking that out. You probably also might see her. She is a consultant for TV and film productions, including the Academy Award-winning 2022 movie Pinocchio. So, Ruth, we are so excited to have you here with us tonight. Um, let's just start, I guess, get right into it. Can you tell us why you think the fascists and authoritarians have historically feared women? What is it about us that really threatens their power?
Yeah, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. This amazing organization, and thank you for everything you're doing. We need it more than ever now. What is it about women that threatens authoritarians? When we look at when authoritarians have an appeal, and this is what I did in my book, it goes over 100 years, and you see these patterns. And when societies have had a lot of progress, and often that's gender emancipation, women doing jobs that used to be men's jobs, women having more rights or earning more, things like that. this is when there's a climate created for like a charismatic male demagogue who comes up and wants to turn the clock back and kind of often advertises himself as a kind of macho dominator. And so he and his person, and it's certainly not just Donald Trump, it's Duterte, Berlusconi did this, it's really a global thing. And so they model in their own person this kind of misogynist, we're going to make things right, I alone can fix it. And part of fixing it is taking women's rights away or trying to send them back into the home and make their bodies and their beings claim them by the state. So to be baby making machines or to vacate the job force, whatever the society needs to have patriarchy stay on top.
So your work explores the psychology of strongmen and authoritarians. How does misogyny, and you kind of just touched on this, but how does it serve as a tool of control? So what about that, like trying to like take away reproductive freedom, trying to push people back? How does that serve them? Because I guess
Yeah.
again, too, is it just that women are badasses and we stand up to this stuff? Like, why are they so fearful of that? And why do they use that misogyny to try to control us?
So authoritarians need enemies. They need to constantly be producing scapegoats and enemies. And the enemy must ideally be somebody who's there all the time. And so it's interesting because many times, like if you think about Nazi Germany, most Germans didn't know any Jews. Jews were a tiny percent of the population, and most Germans didn't know Jews. So they had to do this huge propaganda campaign to get people to hate Jews. Now, with women, that's a very, very different thing. And so when men are, this is where we go back to the idea of change in society. If men are feeling like they're losing something, they're losing authority, they're losing prestige, they're losing their job, and there's an economic downturn, and women are getting more rights and more power, they're also often either living with women, or of course they have mothers and sisters. And so women can be, so that the extremists and the strongman leader can weaponize hatred against women to kind of support himself and the idea that women have to be dominated. And so today there's, like, you see so many areas and ideologies where this is going on. The trad wife stuff, where, and I started like some years ago. When you're a woman and you're out there in the public, your DMs become like a kind of bellwether of what's going on. And I started to get these messages from guys, especially on when it was Twitter, saying, you need to be barefoot in the kitchen. And I was like, what is going on with the barefoot in the kitchen stuff? You need to be wearing an apron and baking bread and be quiet, or not as politely. And that's how I found out about this trad wife business. So that's just one manifestation. It makes you to have men be built up, women have to be put down.
Yep, absolutely. That makes sense. And I'm sure being in the public eye, you're just getting all those kinds of messages all of the time. Um, are there moments from history that you could share with us where women, have been successful in their resistance movements and being able to like push back against fascism?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because if we look back at the history of resistance, and my book has a chapter on masculinity, but it has a chapter on resistance. It goes over 100 years. But if we look into it, we see that women were integral or even at the forefront of so many resistance struggles in history, because women often have the most to lose, and women can become, and they know the stakes, and they're also their bodily autonomy is being attacked in ways that men's are not. So women are often at the forefront. Now, sometimes we don't. This is how history until recently would hide what women did. It wasn't considered important what women did. So for a very long time, all the things that women did in World War II, both fighting with guns, but also all kinds of other resistance activities, having messages, being couriers. this was not known, and women were not allowed to march in all of the resistance parades after World War II. They were kept out. So until recently, we didn't even know how important they were. But for example, something I'm thinking about a lot, and I think that we could, in a way, replicate this here, is a very famous movement in Argentina under the military dictatorship called Mothers of the Plaza. And these were women who started to come into this big square in Buenos Aires with pictures, big photographs of their kids or loved ones who had disappeared because the state disappeared many people. And they stood there with these photos, and this was very powerful, right? And it spawned a whole movement that spread to other military dictatorships in Latin America, to say, we're here on behalf of the disappeared, of the silenced. And so they had like a moral authority, right? As mothers, as women who were brave enough to do what men weren't doing. Men weren't the ones coming out there with the pictures. So that's just another example. Pretty much everywhere we see resistance, women are there.
I'm curious. I just thought of this. It wasn't one of the questions I gave you, but because you were talking about women not being recognized for their work in the resistance, do you
Yeah,
think some of that resistance work, like I'm thinking in France or something, like, do you think it helped that they had low expectations of what women could accomplish, or that they flew under the radar because they just didn't
yeah,
expect women to be part of a resistance? Was that, I guess,
yeah.
our standing with them and to our advantage?
Yeah, and not just also in the anti-colonial struggles in North Africa and in Africa, women, including like young women, nobody expected them to be working as resistance couriers or, getting messages or even hiding in, for example, in Muslim countries like Algeria, when they were having their anti-colonial struggle against the French. And many women had it's a Muslim country, so they had their coverings on, and under the coverings they had weapons, they had messages, they had food, because for every resistance fighter you've got to have changes of clothes, you've got to feed them, you've got to, and women have been part of those networks, so women are very good at networking,
Absolutely.
um, family, community. We're going to talk about that later. And so they have participated in just so many ways. And now we have the history of these things. And that's why also in our country and other countries, they're trying to take away gender studies. And they're trying to stop us from teaching the history of gender, because then we won't know what women are doing, even today.
Absolutely. Definitely. My daughter just graduated college and it was in gender studies, but she got a diversity, equity, inclusion certification. And I was like, oh, good for you, girl. You got just under the wire because things are
Exactly.
being taken away.
Yeah.
So what are some common traits of women leaders in history who have just been very super effective?
I think that I'm thinking about this a lot, that we have certain ideas about power, and often those ideas are about power that's not exercised well, right? Power that's about domination, and that's, of course, authoritarians. But one of my sheroes is the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern. And she was very open about trying to embody a different model of power, and she translated that into like much more holistic idea of how to govern. So, for example, um, like when she was doing the metrics for prosperity, for the economic, the budgeting, she used this thing called the happiness index, which says prosperity isn't only how much we make and like the facts of economics, it's also well-being, it's also psychological and emotional well-being. That's what makes a society prosperous. So I think about that women could be more creative as leaders. And they also there's lots of studies, whether they're corporations or countries, they also tend to collaborate more rather than try and dominate. And so they're better leaders. They take input. Because the thing that happens with these strong men, and we're seeing it in our country today, they're so insecure that they surround themselves with sycophants and loyalists and lackeys, and so over time, they don't get good information. Nobody is telling them the truth. Like, hey, you know what? Your policies are crappy. Nobody will say that, and so they make bad decisions. And so women tend to be collaborative, and they don't fear objective feedback as much because they're not trying to dominate everyone. So stuff like that.
That makes perfect sense to me. And we also love Jacinda Ardern. We actually had her on as a guest. And so if anybody wants to be really
Oh, so you
inspired,
know.
oh yeah, but yeah, she was amazing. And if you, there's a movie, they put a movie about her. So I think it's called Prime Minister. So go look for it if you guys want to be really inspired right now. So we're seeing growing authoritarian, like not authoritarianism, not only in the United States, but globally. Um, so how are all of these different regimes specifically targeting women?
So, I mean, one way is to a lot of them in Europe, and not only in Europe, in America, there's a kind of racist population engineering schemes going on that you have to increase the population, but only certain people should be having babies, right? You deport or you um, jail other people who are not supposed to be having babies, and if they're not white, not Christian. So, whenever you have these population engineering schemes, and Nazism was one of the most famous, but think about also in China how they're trying to increase the population, but for years they wanted people to have only one child. But anytime the family becomes the subject of interest by the state and controlled by the state, women's rights are curtailed. So you're seeing a lot of that. You're seeing it in Hungary. You're also seeing huge amounts of attacks for much the same reason against LGBTQ people. And there's this idea of the quote natural family that's espoused by some female leaders too, the former female president of Hungary and Giorgia Meloni in Italy. The natural family is a man and a woman, no same-sex marriage, no surrogacy, and the woman must be, subordinate because she has to be home having as many white Christian babies as possible. So that's spreading, and it's not just. It's also like in Brazil, followers of Bolsonaro who identify as European. They're doing the same thing. So it's a kind of global
So it's not just the United States. So I
thing.
guess it's
No,
important to recognize that.
no. The things really important is that a lot of the stuff we are hearing from the Trump administration, whether it's attacks on gay people or the idea that civilization is threatened if there's too many of the wrong babies and all this. This is actually this was very common in Russia 10 years ago. The same stuff. Also, like if trying to smear teachers as pedophiles, all of this, horrible stuff, that comes from Russia. So we're like doing Russia 10 years later.
Not exactly the model we want to be following. Um, okay, so do attacks to those, so the attacks we're seeing today on women's rights, do those mirror like early warning signs that you've seen in past regimes?
Yeah, and gender. So when I was writing Strongman, and I'm obviously a female scholar, and I just didn't see. I mean, there's tons of studies, like specific studies on gender and specific authoritarian states, but this was a general book, and I didn't see gender being kind of really integrated. So that's why I put that chapter on masculinity in there, because one of the earliest signs is misogyny that becomes kind of weaponized and very prominent. And think about what happened in the United States in 2016. So we were ripe for this kind of backlash because we had Barack Obama, first Black president for 8 years, but we also had legalization of same-sex marriage, women admitted to combat and special forces for the first time. That was a big deal, like 100 years later than some other countries, but finally. And then we had a female presidential candidate. And the stuff, some of us have forgotten what went on, the stuff that went on with Hillary Clinton, where numerous local Republican officials called for her execution. They had effigies of her like being shot during the campaign. And there was like a wave of misogynist hatred toward her that was preaching violence, that became normalized. And of course, Trump did his best to help that along. And then when the Asset Hollywood came out, Asset Hollywood? No,
Access, yeah,
Accent.
access.
Access Hollywood. Yes. When that came out, and he had prepared people that he was going to be leading the restoration of the patriarchy and defeating these awful upstart women. And that's why by then, it was right before the election in 2016, it didn't actually hurt him that this came out, that he was saying, I can grab women by the you know what, because there'd been so much misogyny already. So I'm just giving that as an example. And that happens in other places where waves of misogyny trying to take women's rights away, or just hatred towards women being publicly expressed, is one of the early signs of democratic backsliding, as it's called.
That's interesting. And thank you for the history like reminder, because I think I'd forgotten a lot of the
Yeah.
you just laid out that had happened. I mean, we all
Yeah.
know obviously there was backlash to Barack Obama being elected president. But the timeline you just laid out with women's history in there actually, haven't heard that. So that was really eye-opening. So women, I think you mentioned this earlier, women are just really good at relationship building. And so how do relationships such as friends and families and communities um, really help women or give them a unique power in this type of a fight?
So there's a comment, how do we fight back? That's, of course, the question of the hour. And so this is related because authoritarians, this is all over the world, whether they're communist or fascist, they want to break these horizontal bonds of civil society. They want to break the bonds of community, of family, of trust, across society, within groups, and make you turn against each other, distrust each other. And instead of the horizontal bonds, they want only a vertical bond, the people cheering the leader. And that's why they've got their faces all over. Now Trump's got his face, huge face, like this looks like North Korea on the outside of government buildings. So um, so women have often been the kind of glue of those horizontal ties. The community bonds could be bonds in civil society institutions, whether they're faith communities or mothers groups or whatever. And so women know how to do that. They've always done that. And so that's also why around the world women have been so prominent, because we know from the history of resistance that it's best it happens faster to build pro-democracy movements if you get people there who are already organized, like unions, like your group. And often, maybe not in unions so much, but in these other kinds of groups, it's women who have been doing this work for years.
And I'd like to just reflect for 1 second. I
Excuse
think
me.
that one of the things that we try to do at Red, Wine, and Blue is to let women know how much power they actually have. And
Yeah.
I think we sometimes underestimate that. Like, when I first started organizing and I met Katie Paris, who was our founder, she came down and she said to me, she's like, well, Julie, you got like, parents on your kid's soccer team and you were PTO president and you're really involved in your school. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not that important. You kind of like discount that. I guess I'm curious, like,
Mm-hmm.
what's your reaction? Like, why do women,
Mm-hmm.
how do they recognize the power that they actually have with these relationships?
Yeah, I would love to do a book on that. That's a whole different area. We're encouraged by society to downplay our power and to think that the things that we do are not important. And we all know that even within our sector, if we work outside the home in our sectors, we're told that often there's sexist, a lot of sexist people, and we're told that we're not important, that what we want to study is not important. That's why I was talking about like the role of women in the history of resistance. So it's like so many layers telling us that we're supposed to be living small and what we're doing doesn't really matter. Instead, I'm trying to flip the script now that if we that as things fall apart in this country and get worse, community is going to be everything. And what do I mean by this? It's both that the state can become a hostile force. We're already seeing that. But the state can also be absent. Like think about, hey, the state's not going to help you with disaster relief anymore. My mother's Social Security was terminated in June. So we're trying to get it back. It's like a whole thing. So that happened. And so the state is not acting the way it used to act when we were a democracy. And community is going to become so important. And so what we do at that level is everything. Far from being nothing or unimportant, it's going to be like the way that we revive as a society.
So let's dive into it a little even deeper into that. So we know right now that this, chaos is coming out of Washington and so many people just feel very powerless. But you have said that the real power is local. And so why is that kind of where the magic happens? And why is local
Mm-hmm.
or friend to friend organizing really a critical tool in fighting authoritarianism?
I think because the question of trust, when the state becomes a hostile force, or also things are so polarized that you can't talk to many people, and also women and other groups become ripe for persecution. Having trusted uh, friends and community members, and you have a history with these people. Maybe you go to church together. Maybe your kids, do things together, go on school trips. That's absolutely key, because what authoritarians want to do is make you distrust not only everybody around you and actually betray people. They want you to actually lose faith in yourself and not trust yourself. And I have collected over the years terrifying quotes by people, including women, who lived in real regimes, like regimes that lasted a really long time. And they're like, you couldn't trust anyone and you didn't even trust yourself. Because that's also with when you take truth away.
Mhm.
And what they've done in this country is a kind of methodical attempt to discredit and delegitimize every democratic style authority, even librarians and teachers, um, doctors, scientists, judges. They're all supposed to be corrupt and evil. And so, who do you trust? So, trust is key. And that's why your local environment, people you see every day or once a week, or you have a history with these people, that's where the rebirth can come, I think.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot because, you
Yeah,
hear these things about the disinformation about teachers and what they're teaching and what's happening in public schools. But we always tell members, if someone's saying that in your community, turn it back to your school. Like, do your child teachers
yeah.
do? Oh, no, no, I love my child teacher. I love my school.
That's the thing. Yeah, that's really good.
Yep.
And thus, and there, and we can get to this later too, that um right now people they've had 10 years of this propaganda. And so some of them, you can point out, well, what about, is your child's teacher like that? And they'll go, no, I love his teacher. But that's not moving the need. They're still stuck in the what I call the disinformation tunnel. So it's tough, and you have to be patient. And I believe very much in that. As things get worse and the corruption becomes more evident and the uncaring becomes more evident, I think that people's eyes will open. And the community level where they already know you is the place to start.
Okay, I'm curious about that because I'm going to assume, and I know you're not like social media experts, so don't feel like you have to answer the question that way, but I would assume like in past regimes, there's been right now with social media, we can see things instantaneously. The authoritarian figures can put stuff out and everybody sees it. Um, so I'm assuming that that has also increased the rapid, I guess,
Yeah,
what we're seeing happening in our country right now. But you're saying people's
yeah.
eyes will be open. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Is like it in the terms of like they're going to see how far this is going, or when do you think or people's eyes would be open?
I think they're going to see that the promises made to them, which were always false, by the people they voted for. And I'm not just talking about the president, all the way down, because the GOP is an authoritarian party. And so they've all signed on for, they have the same message. They have to salute the leader. It's compact. They can't dissent. They can't question. And so this is happening in communities too. And as it gets worse, as they keep saying the economy is flourishing, and then it's going to get worse, and people will see in their communities the economy is not flourishing, or they see the effects of the kids falling sick because they don't have vaccines, and so these are people who said, MAGA, America, make America great again, and they're going to see that the opposite is happening, and that's the time to have these conversations with people. And because everyone has, I have it too, family members where they're not very reachable. um, they're still very convinced, and this is from studying authoritarian cults. It takes a long time, and things sometimes have to get very bad for people to wake up. But if you start at the local level, because it's not just the president, it's local politicians, even school board members, we're talking local, then that's what I mean by eyes opening, that, hey, maybe they weren't telling us the truth. Maybe they were actually using us. Um, that kind of thing.
All right. And that's good to know. And I feel actually comfort in knowing that because I think because we consume so much information, a lot of us are like, how could people not see this yet? But there's more to come and people will start to recognize it as it's impacting their life and their local community and the people that they care about. So, what would you say to someone who is just feeling very overwhelmed right now, very scared, all the feelings, due to the
Yeah.
growing authoritarianism in our country? Like, what's your message to them?
So first of all, there's a really good reason that you're feeling overwhelmed. Um, when I first had the idea I'm about to tell you, I was like, oh, this is bad. So the pace of change in our country, the pace of destruction of everything. Think about, like, and there's stuff going on that's actually like an experiment in history, like letting Doge go in and lock out our elected representatives. This is like a private civil service that answers to an oligarch. Like that's just doesn't happen. That's never happened. And the pace of destruction and the wrenching changes, foreign policy, domestic policy, all the Kennedy stuff, all of it, it doesn't resemble other countries where an authoritarian has come to power via elections. So we're only in, what are we in, month 9 of this nightmare?
Yes.
This, if you look at Putin after 9 months, or Erdogan, or name anybody, it's not this fast, not at all. It's more what we're living through. It's more like after a revolution or a coup. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling overwhelmed. And so sometimes I don't look at the news, even though I'm supposed to be, like, on TV and stuff. I do a lot of yoga. I spend time in nature. I'm changing my schedule so I can be, you know, away from New York City a little more. You have to know everybody has their own tolerance, but that's why, like, you're living through this like historic change. And it's felt at every level of government and society. So that so it's not you, it's actually objective reality that is extremely challenging right now. Um, but I think, what can you do? Here we are back to people you trust. It's really, I've been talking to my friends more. Don't isolate yourself. Um, and 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 don't lose hope. No country ever constructed a major pro-democracy movement in 8 months. And we're doing a lot. We've actually done a lot already. So we're doing pretty well. It's just hard to feel that because we're also a really big country. And that makes it kind of more complex.
Well, we appreciate that, the context setting there for that, and I totally agree. And I think finding your friends, keeping in touch, doing like yoga, go out into nature, doing all those things for your community. But hey, coming to events like this, talking, coming to
Yeah,
stuff with Wine and Blue, finding other women who like, share your values and care about the same things that you do. I think it's so important. And that, I'll be honest, I do local organizing. I've been doing it since 2016 where I live. And it's made this a huge difference in my life because I have met women who I would never have met any other way. They are now
yeah,
amazing friends, and I have them as a resource when I'm just like, this is too much. Like I
yeah.
go and talk to them, and then we're doing things together. We're working on local elections. So it's like I'm not just sitting around. I'm taking action and then resting, reading some good rom-coms when I just need a break from
That
reality. So
absolutely. Silly TV.
yeah.
I have my Netflix time. Um, and I think again, everybody has their own tolerance, and there's also so many ways you can be participating. You don't have to be out in the streets. There's a million things you can be doing. But I really think that I've just personally found that I have my Substack, Lucid. I have these weekly Q&As and discussions, a lot like what we're doing,
Yeah.
and a kind of community has formed around them. And um, it's good for me too to come into community every week. And then, of course, one can also have your faith communities and other communities. But I think being together with people, whether it's virtual or in person, is really, really important. I myself didn't know firsthand just how important it was because we haven't lived through anything in the United States like this before at this scale.
Yep, absolutely. And I would be remiss, and I'm going to ask my team, Laura, if she can go find the link for this. But you mentioned like there's so many things you can be doing. We have a guide for that, you all. So if
Yeah.
you're brand new, not only can you get on the app and find this, it's actually right there on the app. But if you are not on the app yet, you can go to our website. We have a guide called 160 Ways to Change the World Without Losing Your Shit. That is the name of the guide, and it gives you a whole bunch of different things you can do. So if you're not the march in the street, go to the rally kind of person, there are definitely other things that you can do to be involved. So let's talk about what gives you hope right now. Are you seeing women successfully pushing back against authoritarianism, or are you seeing things happening in the country that is just filling your heart?
Yeah, I am. And everything from people spontaneously coming out all over America to try and stop ICE from harassing and arresting people. These are just like regular people who are doing something because it's the right thing to do. Also think of um, the the female leaders who have come into our consciousness, and Jasmine Crockett and Jocelyn Benson, and just so many of them who have really are shining and standing out, and that's really important right now because the government is full of uh, sexual harassers. They appoint those people on purpose. Trump 1.0 had a lot of people who were domestic abusers, and I have it in my book. But 2.0, it's on purpose, and that's to make us feel deflated. When all of the officials practically are misogynists and have bad histories with women, that's supposed to make us want to just like hide away. And
Mhm.
instead, we see women out there, no kings, hands off, in government. I think running for office. I think it's fantastic. So all of that gives me hope.
Well, that's great. And yeah, we're big fans of women who are standing up and fighting back. So you mentioned Jasmine Crockett. She's actually coming next week for an event with us. So you guys should go check that out in the app or on the website. And then Heather Cox Richardson's a favorite of ours. She comes a lot to talk, and that's always really inspiring. So we love to see
Yeah.
women out in front.
Historians, female historians.
Yes, female historians, love them. Who knew that Heather Cox? Who knew that a historian would be like the rock star of the, like of this
Uh,
like past couple of years? Um, so if you could leave everyone here tonight with one challenge, like one action that they can do or something in the next few weeks, like what would it be?
I think there's no one thing. Everyone can participate their own way, but what I like to think about is how we can, whatever action we're taking, we can be modeling through our actions, our personal actions and our values, the kind of change we want to see in the world. And that's Make a Change is your amazing song. That's part of your ethos of your group. Um, and I do think it's important, like encouraging people to run for office because it's difficult right now. Like, does anyone want to sign up and be an election official right now? It's hard, but we need good people for the future. And so supporting people, trying to convince people or supporting people who are already running, that's important. But just whatever it is that you choose to do, is it phone banking, is it donating money, is it organizing, being on the streets, know that you are modeling the values of democracy, and that will be recognized.
Well, thank you. And so you have mentioned your Substack Lucid. Is there anything anywhere else or anything else you want to share where people who might want to follow you can find you?
I'm not too active on X these days, but I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram, and it's at Ruth Ben-Ghiat all together. And my Substack is really the essays are not paywalled. The only thing that's paywalled are the weekly Q&As, and they're really where I'm doing most of my writing and thinking about coming up with. I think that just knowing the language to use. What do we call things that are happening? And what can we do about it? I've got a lot of essays on resistance. So if you want to follow what I'm doing, that's signing up for Lucid or just reading it is the best way.
Well, I'm a subscriber, so everybody should get right on there and do that. All right, Ruth, I know that people have been asking questions, and so I am going to bring up Julie. I see Julie nodding her
Yep.
head. So I'm going to bring up Julie. For those who are new to Red, Wine, and Blue, we're the Julies. We do all of the weekly events, and I'm going to let Julie take over and go ahead and talk, share some of the questions that were in the chat with you.
There are so many questions, and you have addressed quite a few of them with, what can folks do? Because that was one of the biggest ones. What can they do today? So we have kind of covered some of that. So let's backtrack into, there were several questions on why are young women falling for this traditional or trad wife nonsense, or why are they a part of the movement? What about all of this authoritarianism and this
Yeah.
movement is attractive to young women?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, something I had written down but didn't get to. It's a complex question, but there is this phenomenon going on now called gender washing. And this is not, I didn't invent this fabulous word, gender washing. It's two female political scientists. It's women who, like Giorgia Meloni, the first female prime minister of Italy, who seem to advertise themselves as breaking the glass ceiling, going where no woman went before. But what they're actually doing is their policies are restricting women's rights, being repressive. And there's a whole bunch of, and we can think of people in our country, and the right has actually around the world been pretty, in a way, better than progressive forces in letting women, as long as they accept the pack of the gender washing, be prominent. And so what is more convincing? It's more convincing to hear, oh, please, women should go back to the home, or they should just be having lots of the right kinds of babies. it's more convincing for young women to be hearing that from other women, especially youngish women like Meloni, who operates on an international scale. And so and there's also, it's just, this is a question of why people are going for authoritarianism. And they've been led to think that they're going to be fulfilled by being in a structure that's dominated by men. And I find that very sad. But it's just, it speaks to the effectiveness of the right-wing propaganda circuits. I don't know if any of you ever saw that. It was like a map of circles, and the circles represented American media, and the red circles were right-wing, and the blue circles were progressive. And it was like a sea of red. And then there were little blue dots, and Midas Touch was a little bigger. And basically, they have colonized the space of YouTube, and so young women have been growing up with this now, and Trump's been around for 10 years talking about this stuff, and all of his collaborators. So they've fallen for this because this is the only thing they're hearing, and Fox News does it. So.
Well, thank you for also addressing why we see some women in seemingly prominent positions. So they are doing this gender washing that you're talking about. So that answered quite a few other questions that folks had asked as well.
It's a big problem.
Let's see. Let me keep going because I have like 6 pages here of questions. Someone was asking about Moms for Liberty and how did they get so influential? And I know that we have here at Red, Wine, and Blue, we have fought against extremism and especially against book bans, and just kind of exposing what's in the books with our banned book club, and that kind of thing. But how did they get to be so influential?
I think this is the power of the local. You know what they did that was very smart, in a horrible way, smart and effective. And this is the Orban playbook and the Kremlin playbook. They focused on issues that would make people the most anxious possible, such as what is really happening to your child when they're at school? Mm-hmm. What are they really learning? Who are these people who are teaching them? And then when COVID came, they focused on people feeling like that their bodies were they were being told what to do in their bodies. Mm-hmm. That was the whole anti-vax, anti-mask. So, but the schools thing was really powerful because they weaponized people's love for their children and fear of what happens to your child. I'm a mother, like, when your child's not home, if you have trust in the institution, you don't worry. You don't worry about what's happening to your child when they're at school. So they destroyed that trust, and they did that very smartly. And then they also followed the precinct strategy, which is Steve Bannon. They went from the ground up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the authoritarians fear women in general, or do you think it's, this current administration that we have?
No, it's a more general thing. They fear women who are not going to submit to them. They don't fear all women. Mm-hmm. If you submit to them or you become like a Barbie doll, like Ivanka and Melania and all the stand-ins, Kristi Noem with the extensions, like if you become like a robot, then they don't fear you. In fact, you might get a really high-ranking job. But if you are making good trouble as a woman and speaking out, and you're not going to submit, then you come into you come in for, their wrath.
What do you think the next steps in this administration are going to be? Somebody said, how might things get worse? Well, I'm going to change it to how might things change in the next 6 months to a year? Hopefully they're not going to get worse because we're going to fight that.
Um, that's, I think they're going to continue to do everything they're doing. I think that the economy is going to start to suffer. I do think there's going to be a backlash. The problem is what they're doing is trying to intimidate the American people by having all the troops in the streets. And you're going to, I think, one of my fields is military coups and that whole thing. So unfortunately, I think you're going to see more of this. You're going to see attempts to kind of conquer Chicago and all of this stuff. But there's going to be a backlash to this when it goes further, because they've been firing on all fronts. They've been wrecking science, wrecking medical care and public health. They've been wrecking the economy. They've been wrecking, and at some point, the toll of this is going to be impossible to hide. And then there'll be a backlash. When that is, I don't know. But that's the process I see.
Someone said that they were told that we were more matriarchal millennia ago. So if that's true, why did we become patriarchal, and when did women's history get stamped down?
I think, I don't know when. I don't know how to answer that in terms of like going way back. But part of it is as the industrialized Western world became the norm, patriarchy became more established, and other societies or other norms of ways of organizing gender got stamped out or considered strange, or indigenous traditions that there's a lot of, like the mothers of the plaza that I mentioned before in Argentina. They came from this culture that a lot of them were grandmothers also, that the respect for the elders, which is a lot of indigenous cultures have this, but that gets stamped out by kind of Western rationalism. So that's a problem. And the erasing women's history. I mean, we had a big boom in women's history, and so the backlash is just starting now.
So someone asked the question, why don't men show up? And I want to say that we have quite a few men on this call tonight. So men do show up, but why does it seem like men don't show up? And why is the heavy lifting in society's maintenance left to women?
I think that men do show up, and right now is a period with there's like a vibe, a cultural moment, which has been built by right wing, the Joe Rogans, all these people, to make men who want to show up feel hesitant because maybe they're not being real men. Think about all the investment of Trump and Trumpers and MAGA, the whole world, in a certain kind of defining manhood as brutish, like a brute. And that's going on. That's the manosphere. And so that leaves far less room for other men, other models of manhood that are egalitarian, that are democratic. You don't have to be, a fan of subjugating women. There's another way to be. And many, many millions of men are that other way. And these are the people we are with. But right now there's more pressure on men to be brutes. And that's why it's like when you have fascism taking over, you hold up men who are brutes as heroes. And so you try and change the culture of the country to have brutes be the heroes. And that's what's been happening. And Trump was perfect person to be the Pied Piper of this, because he's been being a brute for decades.
Do you think that these male authoritarians have women in their lives that play a role in tampering down their attitudes? Sisters, wives, daughters?
I think ultimately no one can get through to these guys. They are narcissists, most of them. I'm not trying to be a psychologist, but they are narcissists. They don't listen to anyone. They fear any kind of real feedback. So even if there's somebody who can get through to them, it doesn't really change their behavior. They're going to do whatever they want. Um, and often they just if somebody's too frank with them, even if it's their wife or whatever, they just kind of marginalize them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are women resisting this kind of control globally? You know, you've mentioned some ladies
Yeah.
in Argentina. Do you see where this is really growing?
So you know what I find very frustrating that the media doesn't cover this. You know that we're actually, we hear, yes, authoritarianism's, it's spreading. We hear about this every friggin' day.
Mhm.
What we don't hear about is that we're actually living through a global renaissance of nonviolent protest all over the world. Since about 2019, many countries have had the biggest protest they've ever had, or the biggest in like decades. Think about in Iran, or in countries where it is extremely dangerous to protest. Think about all the women in Iran who didn't wear their head coverings, or remember they were cutting their hair. That was like in 2023 into 2024. That's recent. Think about in China, it is not easy to protest there. There were the lockdown protests, and 79 universities participated and had protests, and there were women out there at all of these universities. So there's a ton going on with protest, and women are always present. And we just don't hear about it. Nobody's talking about it.
Well, I want to thank you for being here. I'm going to kick this back over to Julie. But thank you for helping me wade through the questions in the chat.
Well, we'll just keep you up for Julie, and I just want to give Ruth like an opportunity. Is there anything you want to say before we end here tonight? Anything we haven't asked you that you want to, I guess end with?
Just thank you for being part of this, and thank you for all you're doing, and it makes a difference. Never think that what you're doing doesn't matter. And sure, we can always all do more, but it's the effectiveness of what we're doing that matters, and also doing it with others. And so thank you for that.
Well, in case you didn't see in the chat, we had a couple of comments about being a national treasure. People were thanking you for your time. So
Aw.
just wanted to make sure. I thought you might like the national treasure comment. I wanted to highlight that. I am going to bring up one more time. So, you guys have been hearing a lot of the things that we're doing, a lot of the things that we have coming up. Jasmine Crockett, Heather Cox Richardson. In fact, I saw people talking about Jesus and John Wayne, the book in the chat. We have had Catherine Stewart. I think that's her name, coming on, who has a very similar books. Tia Leving, who's talked about women in evangelical culture. So go to our YouTube, because there's a lot of amazing videos of things that we've had, but you can also find a lot of that on the app. So I'm just going to put this up here one more time. Hope that you will
Julie,
get.
someone mentioned Erica Chenoweth too.
Oh, Erica,
Yes.
Chenoweth on.
Yeah.
So Ruth is very familiar with Erica.
Yeah.
All that's on YouTube, so please go ahead and go find that. But for now, we just want to say thank you so much for your time and your knowledge and
Thank
coming to
you.
us tonight. And we thank everybody, and we hope to see you soon at another event.